Hello, and welcome to our very first episode of the Habitat Home Show. My name is Brad Roediger. I'll be your host. I'm also the Director of Development for Habitat for Humanity of Greater Dayton. Over the next about 14 episodes, we're going to be showcasing the impact that Habitat for Humanity has in the Greater Dayton region. So to start off, and we are honored to have as our very first guest, the Executive Director of Habitat for Humanity of Greater Dayton, Mrs. Diane Graham.
Thank you, Brad, for having me on the first show.
Anytime. She's also my boss. Full disclosure there, so I have to be kind. So Diane, I think a lot of people know what Habitat does, or they think they know what Habitat does. We see Jimmy Carter building houses kind of deal. Is that all of Habitat?
Well, no. As you know, Jimmy Carter didn't start Habitat. Millard and Linda Fuller did. But Jimmy Carter is our most famous volunteer, and he's still volunteering at 90 years old.
So is that all that Habitat does to serve families, is build them a house?
I think one of the myths is that it's just a housing ministry where we just build houses and sell those houses to deserving families. But I think that our audience would be interested to know that we work on building the family that resides in the house. And you build a family, you raise children well, and then you build a community.
Mm-hmm. So why do you have to build the family inside of the house, before the house?
Well, many times our families who on the qualification end are low income may not have the opportunity to have all the resources that the rest of society might have. So we're helping to level the playing field there.
Gotcha. So these families wouldn't necessarily be able to get a loan from one of the local or national banks in the country that provide mortgages, correct?
That is correct. But they all have a mortgage.
So I was just going to ask that because you said they buy the house. So they actually pay Habitat back?
Yes. And we're 32 years old, so our first houses that were, I guess we didn't build the first year, but we were building by 1984 and 85. So those people have paid off their home and they own it free and clear. And we have probably, I would say, at least 25 to 30 families that have paid off in those 32 years.
Gotcha. And I was going to ask, one of my questions was, how long has this affiliate been around?
Since March 30th of 1983.
Really? Okay.
The oldest affiliate in Ohio.
Nice. The year after I was born, so that's very nice.
Oh,
it's
my.
Good to hear. Not to rub it in, Daddy.
It's all about you, Brad.
Our more mature audience, let's say. And it's interesting. Habitat is an international organization, correct?
Yes.
I got to spend some time on a trip in Guatemala last year, building with Habitat. And I got to speak with who's considered Habitat's first volunteer, Clive Rainey. And he actually told me a nice little nugget that could be used in trivia if you're into that kind of thing, that the first actual board meeting was held right here in Dayton, Ohio. And that's the first board meeting for the international organization.
I thought about a future show being a founder show.
Okay.
Because I don't think people realize that many of the true founders of Habitat International came from the Dayton church community, really. Yeah, so wouldn't that be cool?
Yeah, definitely.
Dr. Robert Walker has already expressed interest in being on that show.
So that might be a future guest then we'll have here. Stand by, I guess. So it was, you say Habitat was founded with much of the church community. It is a Christian organization, correct?
It is. And Millard Fuller made his money. Actually, he was a millionaire by the time he was in his early 30s, but was rather unfulfilled by just making money. And so he went to, he's from Americus, Georgia. And so they did some mission work and went to Africa and helped folks out. And then he realized that the model that Habitat, is based on, with the sweat equity, that's how you earn your down payment, is by putting in hours. And the fact that you make that house affordable for low-income families who are deserving, but they're working, and they're going to pay you back, and that revolving fund for humanity continues to build for other people. Millard thought about this brilliant concept and said, we've got to come home and do it starting in Georgia, in a little rural town in Georgia, and until we eliminate poverty housing in the United States.
How did you say in the United States, but worldwide, how many houses has Habitat built?
It's millions. And remember, when you build abroad in a third world developing country, you can build for less than $5,000, just like the one you did in Guatemala.
Certainly.
There's nothing fancy about it. It was, well, you describe it.
Oh yeah, I mean, coming from a construction background, it was something completely different than I've seen here in the States, in that it was cinder blocks, 3 or 4 rooms with a kitchen, and not necessarily sliding windows or anything like that, no shutters, but it was definitely a step up for the compared to the rest of the houses. And I think it was very similar to what we see in the neighborhoods locally, is that it's usually the best house. In this case, in Guatemala, it was in the area, but in ours, it would be like on the block, essentially, right?
And I think one of the most touching things that I heard you say about your trip was the health aspects, that it wasn't just the house. So you're also helping the family who lived in it. That many of the women that were homeowners down there were going blind by the time they were 40 years old from the smoke in the house. So you built them this smokeless oven, which they didn't have, and water filtration. I mean, to us, these are things that we have, but they don't. So when we all, as Habitat donors, there is a tithe involved. 10% of unrestricted donations goes to help people in other countries, and the local Habitat's tithe went to Guatemala. So I feel like, in addition to the 11 houses we're building here this year, we're also building in Guatemala, and it goes a lot further.
So how many houses have you built in the region since 1982, I guess? I can't do math that quick in my head, I'm sorry.
Well, the Dayton affiliate is well over 200 now. But we, in January of 2014, merged with Greene County, and they had 25. So we are definitely up around 250-ish, I would say, counting rehabs. And then now we're even doing critical home repairs. So I would say by the end of this fiscal year, we'll be pushing 300 families served. Excellent.
And what communities, I know you said Montgomery and Greene, so we serve a larger region than just the Dayton proper. But what other communities do we build in?
Well, we've built in every community other than Centerville and Oakwood in Montgomery. And in Greene County, I know that there's Xenia, Fairborn, Jamestown. The rural cities, I think there's maybe 1 or 2 versus, several.
So I know you've been with the organization for a while, but how long have you been with it as a volunteer or as the executive director?
Well, I was fortunate enough to have started volunteering in 1987. And I didn't know that it was so new. I just saw that there was a need, and it was in the marketing and public relations side. And then I was fortunate enough to have been asked to be the executive director in 2008. So if you can imagine, to have volunteered somewhere for 20 some years and then been asked to come to work and get paid for what you were doing as a volunteer, it's pretty sweet. It's very rewarding to be able to go to work every day and do something you love.
So how would you say, in your opinion, having been with the organization for almost its whole existence, how has it changed from the late 80s into now 2015?
I am so glad you asked that question. In the beginning, I would say we were coached by International to constantly report on construction statistics. And we decided at our affiliate that we had to work harder at building the family that lived within the walls first. And if you made every decision based on that versus just construction statistics, then all your decisions would be right. And lo and behold, Habitat International came around to that same way of thinking about 3 years after we already did it. So I guess we're, very progressive and innovators here.
I would agree. I would agree. So it sounds a lot like, and what you're describing there is that pretty much so building the house is just the tip of the iceberg.
That's the part that people see. But our families, as you know, Brad, we put them through 6 months of training that they may not have received in life prior to that to make them successful homeowners. Mostly about money. Because if you've lived in public housing your whole life, then you don't really know how to keep a budget, how to make sure you have enough money to pay your utilities.
Sure.
And feed your kids.
Yeah, which can be difficult for anybody at any income level. What income levels do you serve? There has to be a need for secure, affordable housing.
Right. We actually can serve anywhere from 30 to 80% of the adjusted median income for our county. And the chart is actually based on family size. Gotcha. So, of course, the minimum and maximum is based on if you have 2 children or 5 children, so that you can make more money if you have 5 children.
Sure. So what I'm hearing then, tell me more about Habitat as a whole, because I know we've talked about the family services and training the families, the construction side of it, but you oversee a much more complex organization than just serving the families through their training and building a house, correct?
Correct. And I think most people don't realize that we really run 4 businesses out of our little building on 115 West Riverview. One is that we're a nonprofit. So we obey all the rules that govern nonprofit. Number 2, we are the mortgage bank. So for 32 years, those 200 plus homeowners are making their payments back to us, so that money recycles and helps build other houses. So then we are now under the regulation and compliance regs of the Consumer Finance Protection Bureau. So that's new for us, but we never hurt anybody anyway. But you know why that happened. There were some problems in banking.
Sure.
So that's our second business. Our third, as you know, is a construction company. And Norm runs our business very well. He acquires property, and we also build an energy efficient home. We work very hard. We're Energy Star certified so that the utility costs for those families that we serve are 30% lower. And then finally, we have a Restore, which is a store that sells furniture and appliances and home style goods, slightly used and many new, to the general public. And I do want to say that many people think that you can't shop there unless you're a Habitat family, and that is not true. Anybody can shop there.
Right. It would kind of be counterintuitive to sell our partner families furniture and things like that, when really the furniture is a revenue stream for the organization to help us build more houses in the community, isn't it?
Correct. So it is complex, how we run our business compared to, maybe a smaller nonprofit.
Sure. And it fascinates me, the energy efficiency part. How many different styles of houses do you do? Do you have a certain set of plans? How does that work?
I know that we have 9 house plans that we have on boards that we can display, but I understand that there are more than what we see on those boards, so maybe 11 or 13, so that we fit into any neighborhood that we're lucky enough to receive property in.
Sure. So do you actually get out and do the builds?
As a matter of fact, I don't.
Okay.
I used to, and so did my husband, Frank, but we weren't very good at it, so somehow that we were never asked to return.
And I think we'll address this later as we talk with volunteers, but you don't have to have any skills to volunteer
None.
with Habitat, correct? Yeah. Excellent, excellent. So what would you say, and this is coming from your vast experience with Habitat, is your favorite part, or what really keeps you getting up in the morning at, I know you said you wake up at like 4 a.m. Most mornings, probably worrying about the staff members that you have. But what's your favorite part about going
I think that all of us keep coming back because we affect change. And sometimes it's really fast change, like somebody learned something that they can put to use the next day, but at the very worst, it's generational change. The child that was raised in a Habitat house out-earns and is more educated than his or her parent. That's what I'm proud of.
And what do many of your families, I'm sure there's a certain percentage, have children? Is that a majority?
I would say that there are maybe 1% of Habitat families don't have children. So
Really?
we are
Okay.
serving children.
And how big of a house then? Because some family sizes vary from. I grew up in a 2-child household, but my mother had 8 brothers and sisters. So how big of a house do you build?
Our smallest house plans are, and I hope Norm comes and corrects me at some point in time, that, is maybe right around 1,000 square feet, so 3-bedroom, 1 bath. But then our largest house plan, I think, is more like 1,500 square feet. I could be wrong here, but it's a 5-bedroom, 2-bath.
Oh, okay.
And 2-story ranch, we have them all.
And do you have garages and sheds or anything like
Whatever
that?
is required by code for the community in which we build.
Because obviously it has to be affordable. So
Yes.
do the families, and on that point, do the families get choices as they go through? And since they are buying the house, how much ownership can they take in the decisions of the design and the rest of the house?
At the halfway point, they can select the neighborhood, the available properties. But then I think Norm and Gail kind of guide them into, like, we're not going to put a ranch in the middle of a whole block full of 2 stories and vice versa. So most of the city planners just can't believe how nicely our houses fit into the existing neighborhoods.
Excellent, excellent. Well, Diane, I thank you for being our very first guest. Unlike Rob Dennis and his show, I have no prizes or anything for
Aw.
you. Maybe we'll incorporate that later on. I'll have to get that passed from my boss for the budget. But I do want to thank you for taking part in this session and educating us about Habitat for Humanity in the greater Dayton region. So
My
thank you,
pleasure.
Diane.
Thanks for having me.
So next up, we're going to go to have a little segment on featured volunteers. Volunteers are a huge part of the Habitat for Humanity of Greater Dayton organization, and so we'll be introducing our volunteer director, David Mauk, and spotlight a couple very meaningful and very dedicated volunteers. Welcome back to the very first episode of the Habitat Home Show. As we mentioned at the end of the last segment, volunteers are a very important part of what Habitat for Humanity of Greater Dayton does. So our very next guest with me today is Mr. David Mauk, probably the funniest person at Habitat. He is our Volunteer Services Director, and he's going to take a little bit of time to talk about our volunteers and highlight a group of volunteers that have shown quite a bit of dedication over the years. So welcome, David.
Thanks. Excited to be here and excited to get the word out into the community about volunteerism and Habitat for Humanity of Greater Dayton. I think I have one of the greatest jobs in the world in the sense that I get to engage with people and get them excited and plugged into what we're doing at Habitat for Humanity so they can make a great impact and volunteer with our organization. Probably one of the neatest and most dynamic groups that we work with is a group called the Golden Hammers. And the Golden Hammers are an incredibly dedicated group of people that actually volunteer with us one day a week, usually on Wednesday. They're a group of retired folks who have been involved with Habitat for about 10 years and volunteer with us just about every Wednesday, and they'll also help us out with some other projects as needed. So really lucky to have them involved, and it's great as a volunteer director, knowing that our sites need volunteers Tuesday through Saturday, knowing that Wednesdays are covered by the Golden Hammers is something that really takes a load off of my mind each week.
Mm-hmm. And how many volunteers do you work with in a year, Golden Hammers included?
Yeah, the Golden Hammers have about 15 volunteers all told, but altogether we have about 3,000 volunteers that make an impact on Habitat for Humanity throughout a calendar year. And that's not only on our build sites, which I think is kind of the traditional way people think about volunteering with Habitat, swinging a hammer and get involved that way, but also in our restore, our community store, we need at least 8 volunteers per day to make that operation successful as well.
Excellent, excellent. Well, thank you very much for talking about our volunteers today. on a side note about the Restore, you can actually get the items that we are sitting on from our Restore at 115 West Riverview Avenue.
Currently at the Restore, we have a great selection of new Whirlpool refrigerators and stoves. These stoves and refrigerators are currently being sold for about 60% off of what they would sell for in a typical retail environment. These appliances are stainless steel and would look great in any kitchen and home. The stoves feature double doors and allow for additional baking, a must-have when hosting holiday parties during the upcoming holiday season. The refrigerator freezer combos feature a double door design with the freezer on the bottom to allow for easy access and increased storability. These appliances are currently on our showroom floor and ready to be purchased. In addition to these items, we have many more new and gently used merchandise, including tables, chairs, couches, beds and bedroom furniture, cabinetry, washers and dryers, doors, sinks, and much, much more. Stop into the Restore, buy what you need at a fraction of the cost, and support Habitat for Humanity's mission of giving people a hand up, not a handout. We are located at 115 West Riverview Avenue, Dayton, Ohio, 45405, and our store is open Tuesday through Saturday.
How would somebody get involved if they wanted to volunteer, whether it was with the Golden Hammers or with Habitat in general?
Yeah, one of the neatest things I think about Habitat for Humanity of Greater Dayton specifically is it's really easy to get involved and get engaged and get signed up to be a volunteer with our organization. Probably the easiest way to get signed up quickly is through our website, which is www.daytonhabitat.org. Right on the homepage there, you can click on the volunteer link and you'll see a calendar of days and times that will be needing volunteers, and sign yourself up right there on the website. Also, you can call me directly at our offices at 937-586-0860, and I'm at extension 29, David Malk. Go ahead and ask for me, and I'd be happy to help you in every way possible to get you signed up and involved with Habitat for Humanity of Greater Dayton.
All right, well, thank you very much for joining us this afternoon.
Absolutely. Thank you, Brad.
Yep, anytime. So each month, we're going to be featuring a different part of the same build. This current build is at 6700 Sandy Drive in Trotwood. It's a build that it's a very, very unique opportunity for Habitat for Humanity of Greater Dayton. The money, or the part of the money for this build was donated by an anonymous donor in honor of Pope Francis and the humbleness and social justice that he embodies. So this month, we're going to start with the very kind of second part to the foundation, let's say, which is the framing. So the walls are up on this house, the roof is going to be going on soon, and then we'll actually be able to get inside before the winter hits. Welcome back again to the very first episode of the Habitat Home Show. We appreciate you watching us today, and as a gesture of our appreciation, we want to make sure we give something back to you. So with me now is our Field Operations Director, Mr. Norm Miozzi. He's going to be here for a segment we're going to call Norm's Know-How. He's going to give us some tips on how we can take care of our home through the different seasons.
All right, thank you, Brad.
Yeah, welcome.
And some of the things that that I'm going to talk about are things that we teach all of our homeowners, but they of course make sense for any homeowner. With fall in full swing and winter about to approach, of course, we like to think about winterizing our homes and weatherproofing our homes. So the first thing is, of course, we suggest that everybody this time of year checks your gutters, your downspouts. Clean out the leaves. As the leaves start to fall, of course, things can freeze, they can overflow, and that, of course, is bad for any home. Something else I suggest to every homeowner, something people don't think about, is the first time you hear on the news they talk about a frost or a freeze warning, go outside and disconnect everything from your hose bibs. Newer hose bibs are made so that they don't freeze as long as there's nothing on them to prevent the water from coming out. Of course, if there's a hose on there, the hose can then prevent the water from draining, the hose bibs freeze, and then of course in the springtime you turn on your water and you have a leak inside your house.
So you called that a hose bib?
Hose bib, outside faucet, thank you.
I usually wear those when I eat, but yeah, okay, yeah.
All right, something else, of course, this time of year, make sure that you check your furnace filters. It not only makes your furnace run better, last longer, but of course it makes it more energy efficient. So every 30 days it's a good idea. Just pull the old filter out, put a new one in, especially this time of year though, as we start to close our doors up for the colder weather. Check your smoke detectors. Make sure that the batteries are good. If you haven't changed them in a while, it's inexpensive as far as maintenance goes to just change the batteries and make sure they're working for the winter as you start to fire up the furnaces. And then lastly, take a look at the outside of your house. Check all of the areas where caulking is already, or anywhere that maybe weather or bees or something might have caused holes, gaps. Because as you of course, as it starts to rain more, you want to make sure that you don't have leaks. So caulking being one of the biggest challenges that people I think have, or making it look good. My wife always used to threaten me that if it didn't look good, she was going to call somebody to pay somebody. So I actually would like to show everybody just some real easy tips to make caulking simple. So of course you have a caulk gun. With a caulk gun, the biggest thing is the tip of the caulk gun when you cut it. You want to make sure that you cut a very small hole. The smaller the hole on the tip, the better that you'll able to, or the better job you'll get as far as when you go to caulk goes. Thank you. Once you have your caulk gun loaded up, the other thing is when you start to caulk areas like on your bathtubs or around the house on your windows, you just basically get the caulk on there. Same thing with a smooth motion. You just kind of run the caulking along like so. And then the trick to getting the caulk to look good, if you use a sponge and you actually wet the sponge, wring it out really well. When you use a sponge to wipe the caulking back, it not only gives you a really smooth line, but actually it cleans off the edges. So if you're caulking things, sometimes you don't even have to repaint. But I guarantee you do it like this and your wife will not yell at you.
Well, thank you, Norm. Those are some great tips. I know this time of year I always have to empty the gutters for my parents, and they don't let me around the caulk gun. So I'm not going to tell them I know how to do this now. It'll get me out of one more thing possibly, but we appreciate those tips. And again, we hope that you're able to use these at home as you go through the fall and winter months. So that wraps up our very first episode of the Habitat Home Show. I want to thank you for tuning in, and we hope to see you next time, where we'll be featuring some new Norm's know-how tips, as well as highlighting some other ideas, some other parts of the Habitat for Humanity mission. Thank you again, and we'll see you next time.